Your Excellency, Ambassador Kodama, distinguished speakers and guests, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for the launch of the NEA report on 5 years after the Fukushima Daiichi accident, nuclear safety improvements and lessons learned. Opening remarks will be made by Ambassador Kodama, permanent representative of the Delegation of Japan to the OECD, and by Mr. William D. Magwood IV, NEA Director General. Our keynote speaker will be Mr. Honey, head of the NEA Division of Nuclear Safety, Technology and Regulation, who will also be delivering the presentation of Dr. Jean-Christophe Niel, who is Director General of the French Nuclear Safety Authority, ASN, and Chair of the NEA Committee on Nuclear Regulatory Activities, who unfortunately has fallen ill with the flu and will not be able to join us today. The presentations will be followed by questions and answers taken from the live audience and from our Wassembly and Twitter feeds. For the online webcast and Q&A, please see www.oecd-nea.org for links and instructions. This press conference can be listened to in English and Japanese. For the live audience, please turn your headsets to 1 for English and to 3 for Japanese. For online viewers, the language buttons are at the lower left-hand corner of the webcast window. It is now my honor and pleasure to give the floor to Ambassador Kodama. Sir, you have the floor.
Mr. Bill Magwood, the Director General of Nuclear Energy Agency, Mr. Honey, Head of the NEA Division of Nuclear Safety, Technology and Regulation, distinguished journalists, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure and honor to make an opening remark for the NEA's release of 5 years after the Fukushima Daiichi accident. Nuclear safety improvements and lessons learned. I would like to begin by thanking the press people joining us here at the OECD in Paris and everyone viewing this webcast worldwide and those watching even after the live event today. The NEA's mission is, I quote, to assist its member countries in maintaining and further developing through international cooperation the scientific, technological, and legal basis required for a safe, environmentally friendly, and economical use of nuclear energy for peaceful purposes, unquote. More than 50 years have passed since the NEA's establishment, but its mission becomes increasingly more important as nuclear energy's role in world economic activities evolves and becomes more essential. Japan will continue its commitment to support the NEA in fulfilling its important mission under the leadership of Director General Mr. Magwood. The government of Japan welcomes the launch of this NEA report, and we would like to take this opportunity to express our sincere gratitude to all the experts and member countries that contributed to it. The report effectively summarizes activities performed by NEA member countries and its committees to improve and enhance safety since the accident on March 11th, 2011. It also points out further lessons learned and challenges identified for future consideration after the accident. We believe the report's conclusions are highly relevant to all NEA member countries, including, of course, Japan, and that they can be forged through effective international cooperation. The government of Japan's policy is to restart nuclear power plants as an important baseload power source once they satisfy the enhanced safety standards implemented after the experiences and lessons learned from the Fukushima Daiichi accident. Last year, the Sendai Nuclear Power Station Units 1 and 2 were restarted in August and October, having gone through rigorous legal and regulatory procedures that spanned more than 2 years and under new regulatory requirements. By taking all possible measures to ensure operational safety of nuclear power stations and obtaining the understanding of the municipalities hosting nuclear facilities, all efforts will be made to ensure a stable supply of electricity. As is written in this report, ensuring safety is a continual process, and avoiding complacency through international cooperation is very important. As the international forum which seeks excellence in nuclear safety, technology, science, environment, and law, we appreciate and expect the NEA will provide us with essential knowledge, guidelines, messages through this and future activities. Government of Japan will continue to work together with the NEA and its member countries to further learn from the Fukushima Daiichi accident and to ensure that safety is always being improved. Finally, allow me to conclude my remarks by extending our deepest gratitude to the NEA and its member countries for all of your kind support and contributions after the accident. The Government of Japan contributes to the NEA for the safety of nuclear energy in every member country and the whole world. I thank you very much. I thank you.
Well, let me begin by thanking Ambassador Kodama for being here today and participating in this introduction, and also for the leadership and guidance he's provided since I arrived as Director General. Thank you very much, Ambassador. And also my thanks to the Government of Japan for strong support for the programs and work of the NEA in many areas, including that of nuclear safety. We at the NEA appreciate the highly productive relationship we maintain with many Japanese organizations and agencies. We look very much to continuing our work with all of them to support the continuing effort in Japan to deal with the aftermath of the tragic events of March 11, 2011. Our efforts to support the Government of Japan and the people of Fukushima Prefecture will continue. Working to support analysis and dialogue in radiation protection and cooperation to investigate the scientific and technological challenges related to the cleanup of the Fukushima Daiichi site remain very high priorities for our agency. There is much to do and many hard years lay ahead, but the first step of recovering from any tragedy is to learn from experience in order to prevent it from ever happening again. That is what we at the NEA, with our member countries, have been doing since 3/11. When the NEA issued its first report on the accident, we reflected the finding by our members that nuclear power plants in NEA member countries were safe to operate. But we also noted that the Fukushima accident held very important lessons that we needed to learn and apply. The report we released today demonstrates that those lessons have been learned well by countries all around the world. As you were here today, equipment and operations in nuclear plants have been enhanced to make nuclear power plants more resilient to extreme natural events such as earthquakes, storms, and floods. As the report details, plants in NEA member countries are today much more prepared for the unexpected than they were 5 years ago, and therefore are even more safe. Our work will continue as our joint research projects investigate the accident sequences at Fukushima and as we address the complex and challenging issues associated with the human aspects of nuclear safety, such as safety culture and organizational decision-making. As we do so, the leaders and experts on the NEA committees who led the creation of this report, most particularly the Committee on Nuclear Regulatory Authorities, the Committee on the Safety of Nuclear Installations, and the Committee on Radiation Protection and Public Health, will be at the forefront of our efforts. I thank all the members of those committees for their work and contributions to bring this report to completion, and in particular the chairman of these three committees who did so much to guide this effort. I also thank the NEA staff for their hard work, many of whom are present today, including Dr. White from the nuclear safety area, Dr. Lazo from radiation protection, and Division Director Yanni Ha, who is also here today from the Division of Human Aspects of Nuclear Safety. I also give my thanks to Mr. Javier Rieg for his successful efforts to realize this very important report. Mr. Rieg, who led NEA's nuclear safety work for more than a decade, just retired on Friday and drove home this weekend to Madrid. Finally, I'll close by noting that the job of all of us in the nuclear field is to learn from experience and to always focus on safety. This report documents where we are today, but it is not the end of the story. The story of assuring safety is one that always is ongoing. Now, with that, you will hear more details about this report from Mr. Ho Ni, the head of the NEA Division of Nuclear Safety, Technology, and Regulation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As mentioned earlier, I will be making remarks on this portion of the presentation on behalf of Dr. Jean-Christophe Niel, Chair of the Nuclear Energy Agency's Committee on Nuclear Regulatory Activities, and Dr. Niel is also the Director General of the French Nuclear Safety Authority. And under his leadership as chairing the CNRA, he provided significant contributions to the 2013 report as well as this new report. And I will also say thank you very much, Ambassador Kodama and Director General Magwood, for your introductory remarks. In this portion of the presentation, I will provide you with an overview of the newest NEA report on the Fukushima Daiichi accident. These remarks will also include highlights of some of the actions taken by NEA member countries in the 5 years since the accident. In addition, this portion of the remarks will provide you with a summary of the main conclusions of the new report. Let me provide you first with a very brief synopsis of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear accident. Almost 5 years ago, the accident occurred on March 11, 2011, where a large earthquake followed by a large tsunami inundated the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. This resulted in a loss of electrical power and heat sink. This event was designated as a major nuclear accident of level 7 on the International Nuclear Event Scale. Key reminders from this accident show that whatever preventive and protective measures are taken, the possibility of a nuclear accident can never be completely ruled out. All the lessons of the accident must be drawn, and this will take a long time, at least 10 years, even if many lessons have already been taken into account. The responsibility for nuclear safety is indeed a national one. Licensees have the prime responsibility for safety under the control of the regulatory body. However, we must remember that nuclear accidents can go beyond borders, therefore international cooperation is necessary. Following the Fukushima Daiichi accident, many actions have been engaged at the international level, including those led by the NEA and the International Atomic Energy Agency and also NSREG in Europe. I'll provide you a very brief summary of the NEA's 2013 report. In 2013, the NEA published a report entitled The Fukushima Daiichi Nuclear Power Plant Accident, OECD NEA Nuclear Safety Response and Lessons Learned. This report detailed the key immediate actions of the NEA and its member countries to the accident. Among the key findings of the 2013 report was that many member countries had performed focused safety reviews of their operating reactors in face of extreme external hazards similar to those experienced at Fukushima Daiichi. These reviews were also referred to as stress tests in some countries. NEA member countries considered that their nuclear facilities were safe to continue operations while further reviews continued. At the same time, they identified and implemented safety improvements to face extreme situations, to prevent accidents, and to limit their consequences and to manage them. It also stressed the importance of other issues like the importance of ensuring strong safety cultures among operators and the regulatory body, especially in maintaining a questioning and learning attitude. The importance of independence and transparency among regulatory bodies and governments, and the importance of performing studies and research to improve safety. Now we'll transition to the new report. Similar to the first report issued in 2013, this report was a collaborative effort by the same 4 standing technical committees at the NEA: the Committee on Nuclear Regulatory Activities, or the CNRA, the Committee on the Safety of Nuclear Installations, or the CSNI, the Committee on Radiation Protection and Public Health, or the CRPPH, and also the Nuclear Law Committee, the NLC. This new report provides a summary and an update on activities performed by NEA member countries and the NEA since the accident, as well as further lessons learned and challenges identified for future considerations. The report is complementary to reports produced by other international organizations with interests in nuclear safety, such as the IAEA and WANO, the World Association of Nuclear Operators. Overall, NEA member countries have continued to take appropriate actions to maintain and enhance the level of safety at their nuclear facilities. And thus, nuclear power plants are safer today because of the actions taken since the accident. International cooperation in sharing experiences and lessons learned has played a very important role in the continuous improvement of safety. And going forward, safety will remain a continual process that will evolve further as we learn more through operating experience and research. The collaborative work of the NEA committees in developing this report showed us that enhancing nuclear safety is a common objective around the world. In preparing this report, we found that NEA member countries improved nuclear safety using different approaches, and that not all member countries started from the same point. It was also evident that national standards and requirements are very specific and based on the actual circumstances and specific external hazards for each country. Nuclear safety regulators and the nuclear industry will continue to learn lessons from the Fukushima accident. This continual learning process will be supported by the many important safety research activities that are either ongoing or planned. As I mentioned earlier, the new report provides details on the actions taken by NEA member countries to enhance the level of safety at their nuclear facilities. These main areas where key actions were taken include re-evaluating and protecting against external hazards, improving accident management for severe and complex accidents beyond what was originally envisioned for the design of the facility, enhancing provision and arrangements for radiological protection of operators and emergency response staff, improving emergency preparedness and off-site response, post-accident recovery considerations and approaches, reinforcing regulatory infrastructure, and continuing involvement in nuclear safety research and assessment. In the report, there are many examples of the safety enhancements implemented by NEA member countries. I will highlight just a few improvements here. NEA member countries and nuclear power plant operators have re-examined their external hazard assessments using the most up-to-date information on earthquakes, flooding, and severe weather, as well as using the most up-to-date modeling codes. Based on these assessments, improvements to nuclear power plants have been implemented, such as better flood protection measures. Many nuclear power plants in NEA member countries have taken actions to increase the robustness of electrical power supplies. Furthermore, many nuclear power plants now have diverse provisions for backup, portable electrical power supplies, and increased battery capacity. Likewise, nuclear power plants also have available redundant and portable cooling water systems for the protection of the reactor core and spent fuel pools. Nuclear power plant operators have implemented improved training for severe accident management, actions, and associated procedures. To help protect the containment and minimize off-site contaminations, many NEA member countries have implemented filtered venting capabilities or alternative filtering strategies. Governments have also taken steps to reinforce the principle of regulatory independence and to ensure that the regulatory bodies have sufficient technical competence and resources. Additionally, regulatory bodies and licensees have given much consideration of safety culture characteristics and organizational factors in various decision-making processes. Once again, these are just some of the many examples of specific safety enhancements that can be found in the new report. You can read much more additional information on specific enhancements in these areas, and you can also find internet links at the end of the report that will provide further details for specific NEA member countries. I'll now briefly summarize the main conclusions of the report. First is the continuing enhancement of safety. NEA member countries have continued to take appropriate actions to maintain and enhance the level of safety at their nuclear facilities, and thus nuclear power plants today are safer because of the actions taken since the accident. And as already mentioned, ensuring safety is a continual process which evolves as we learn more through operating experience and research. The effective implementation of safety improvements. While NEA member countries have been able to discuss the same lessons learned from the Fukushima Daiichi accident and the outcomes sought are very similar, there are very different approaches being taken to achieve the goal of enhancing safety and preventing and mitigating potential accidents. Since national standards and requirements are country-specific, member countries are not necessarily starting from the same point, and differences in priorities and implementation of schedules for improvements exist among member countries. Use of operating experience and risk insights. The Fukushima Daiichi nuclear accident did not reveal any unknown initiators, sequences, or consequences. However, the combination and severity of the initiating events had never occurred before, and the evolution of the accident in 3 different units simultaneously was also new. Existing operating experience feedback systems provide good tools to share lessons and help prevent the recurrence of events. The strengthening of regulatory frameworks. Much has been done by member countries in benchmarking and continuously improving their nuclear safety frameworks and regulations. This has included activities on accident management, crisis communication, defense in depth, regulatory effectiveness and independence, safety culture, and the regulation of new reactors. A long-term learning process supported by safety research. As was the case with the 3 Mile Island accident and the Chernobyl accident, implementations of lessons learned from the Fukushima nuclear accident and the continuation of related research activities are long-term actions that will evolve into the future as regulators and the nuclear industry continue to learn. The human element as an essential aspect of safety. Human and organizational factors in safety culture are essential to all aspects of nuclear safety, from design, construction, and operation to the response to potential events or accidents. Both licensees and regulatory bodies identified these as relevant issues to be addressed in the post-Fukushima accident assessment. Emergency management and the long-term commitment of resources. The resources needed to manage an emergency on the scale of the Fukushima Daiichi accident have proven to be considerable. Emergency management planning should thus take into account the Japanese experience in terms of the training and resources required to be appropriately prepared. Enhancing stakeholder involvement and public communication. The experience has reaffirmed that regulators and governments should effectively communicate with their stakeholders to ensure that all aspects of safety in relation to nuclear facilities are understood. To achieve this goal, regulators need to continue improving their communication strategies as well as the implementation of such strategies. Lastly, international cooperation is a key factor in continuous safety enhancement. International cooperation provides a forum for regulators to work together to share and analyze data and experiences, to gain consensus and to develop approaches that can be applied within each country's regulatory processes. The NEA provides an effective forum for cooperation on both medium and longer-term issues in its specific task groups, working parties, and expert groups, as well as through joint international safety research projects. Now I will transition to the portion of the agenda today that will provide you with an overview of NEA's developments in the area of nuclear safety. In addition to what you've just heard regarding the actions that have been carried out directly by member countries, this new report also presents the high-priority follow-on items that NEA committees identify to assist countries in benchmarking and continuously improving their nuclear safety practices. The NEA and its member countries work together effectively and efficiently to address many important topics for the overall purpose of improving safety. As you will learn from this report, these topics include various policy, technical, and organizational issues. As mentioned earlier, the NEA's goal in nuclear safety is to assist member countries in ensuring high standards of safety by supporting the development of effective and efficient regulation and helping to advance the technical knowledge base. To achieve this goal, the NEA provides a forum for its member countries to exchange information, to identify generic issues and trends that will help them anticipate problems, to resolve safety issues, and to address safety issues associated with new technologies and designs, to maintain an adequate level of capability and competence, and to better understand national regulatory requirements and to encourage harmonization of such standards where appropriate. The work of the Nuclear Energy Agency is carried out by its standing technical committees that you can see on the graph. And as already noted, this new report was a collaborative effort by the 4 committees primarily involved with nuclear safety matters: the CNRA, which focuses on nuclear regulation; the CSNI, which focuses on nuclear safety and research; the CRPPH, which focuses on radiological protection; and the Nuclear Law Committee, which of course focuses on nuclear law and legal matters. In the next slides, I will provide you with highlights from each of these 4 areas. In the area of nuclear regulation, the NEA and its member countries considered several important topics that were relevant to the lessons learned from the Fukushima accident. 3 regulatory guidance booklets were published, one on defense in depth, which is a concept that has been applied to nuclear power plant design and operation for many, many years. Defense in depth involves several levels of prevention, control, and mitigation of accidents, and the Fukushima Daiichi accident caused NEA member countries to reflect upon this concept to determine if it was still valid. While the Fukushima Daiichi accident raised questions about this concept, the NEA found that the concept still remains valid, but that strengthening of its implementation may be needed. A second booklet on the characteristics of an effective regulatory body and a third booklet on the safety culture of the regulatory body were also published. These 2 booklets describe several of the key attributes for an effective regulator, such as independence, technical competence, openness, and, again, having a strong safety culture. The Nuclear Energy Agency also established a task group on accident management, which prepared a comprehensive report on best practices related to procedures, equipment, infrastructure, and human and organizational resources for accident management. Additionally, the NEA's working group on operating experience reviewed previous nuclear power plant events, again, found that the Fukushima accident did not reveal any unknown initiators or sequences. However, the combination of the events at Fukushima had not been previously experienced. In the area of nuclear safety and research, technical experts from NEA member countries undertook a number of activities to address lessons from the accident. Representatives from safety research organizations participated in meetings and workshops to discuss and advance the scientific and technical knowledge base in high-priority areas. From this work, several technical reports were published on topics such as improvement of probabilistic safety assessment techniques and tools for external events, implementation of filtered containment venting systems and strategies, understanding of hydrogen behavior and control during severe accidents, measures to enhance spent fuel pool safety, and increasing the reliability of human performance under extreme conditions. NEA member countries also collaborated on various safety research initiatives and joint projects. A senior expert group was established to explore the safety research opportunities post-Fukushima. This effort, called SAREF, has established a process to identify the research and examinations that could be conducted on the damaged Fukushima Daiichi reactors to better understand severe accident progression, system behavior, and waste management. We also have the benchmark study on the accident at Fukushima, or BSAF. Participating countries in the BSAF project are analyzing the accident progression in order to better understand and improve the modeling capabilities of existing analytical codes for severe accidents, as well as to provide Japan with useful information for decommissioning activities at Fukushima Daiichi. And I want to thank the country of Japan for the strong support that they have provided to the SAREF and the BSAF projects. Lastly, there were also 3 Fukushima-related joint research projects launched. ATLAS, being conducted in Korea to study thermohydraulic behavior during accidents. PKL, being conducted in Germany to examine heat transfer mechanism during accidents, and HIMERIS being conducted in France and Switzerland to understand hydrogen risk phenomenology. With respect to radiological protection, the main areas of focus are international aspects of off-site emergency management, post-accident management of food safety, post-accident stakeholder involvement, and radiological protection and management in severe accidents. The Fukushima nuclear accident illustrated the high level of government interest that a nuclear emergency in any country can generate. Efforts by the NEA member countries in these areas have helped governments consider many important questions and issues within their own countries to enhance emergency management and radiological protection. Through good international collaboration in these areas, the NEA published 2 relevant technical reports, one on post-accident food management framework and another on the impact on international food trade. The Fukushima accident affected the lives of tens of thousands of displaced citizens and resulted in considerable economic and environmental impacts. The accident made evident the importance for countries to be prepared to deal with the legal implications of a nuclear accident. Thus, in the area of nuclear law and legal matters, NEA activities have focused on the legal framework established in Japan to compensate victims of nuclear accidents and its implementation with regard to the victims of the Fukushima Daiichi accident, in order to draw lessons for the benefit of the larger international community. Since the Fukushima accident, the international community has moved towards encouraging broad adherence to the International Nuclear Liability Conventions with the goal of achieving a global nuclear liability regime. In 2012, a report was issued entitled Japan's Compensation System for Nuclear Damage as Related to the TEPCO Fukushima Daiichi Nuclear Accident, and an update to this report is currently under preparation by the NEA. And those conclude my remarks regarding the actions taken by NEA member countries as well as the developments at the Nuclear Energy Agency. I thank you for your attention, and we'll turn the floor back to Director General Magwood.
Thank you very much to our speakers for their presentations. I would now like to open the floor to questions and answers. Thank you in advance for focusing your questions on today's report and for giving your name and organizational affiliation prior to the question. Do I see any requests for questions from the journalists present in the room?
Okay. Yes, thank you. Thank you for this report. Very interesting. I would like to know what is the evaluation of Japanese casualties in terms of people, territories, material. And secondly, I would like to know, because, the accident was the problem of a tsunami. Then the walls deemed to protect against tsunami were 10 meters high. And there has been tsunamis before to 2011 which have had waves higher than 10 meters. Then I would like to know if I'm wrong or not. Thank you very much.
Before answering, I didn't catch, can you identify yourself so we...
Delegation to OECD. Thank you, Mr. Magwood. Sorry.
Yeah, well, I know who you are. But let me answer the last question first. I think that broadly it's understood that the regulatory regime in Japan at the time was not successful in preparing for the event that took place very, very clearly. I think there were a lot of assessments done in Japan to point to the fact that there was historic and analytical evidence that a large earthquake with a large tsunami in excess of what was prepared for was possible. And I think there's been a lot documented about that. So I think that it's self-evident that, yes, there were shortcomings in that respect. And I think that if you observe what has happened in Japan since the creation of the new Nuclear Regulatory Authority, there has been a very aggressive move towards correcting that type of practice and to assure that the preparation for plants in Japan for earthquake, tsunami, and other natural events is not simply sufficient, but is more than sufficient to be conservative in case of any miscalculation or misunderstanding about natural events. So I think that there were clearly in the past there were deficiencies. I think those have been addressed very, very successfully. Regarding the first question, I think it's probably more appropriate for you to refer that question to the government of Japan. I don't know if Ambassador Kodama would have any comment on that, but I don't think it's appropriate for the NEA to comment on that specifically because we haven't analyzed that aspect of the accident. We have analyzed the technical aspects associated with the nuclear accident, but have not assessed the economic and other direct effects. But I don't know, Ambassador, if you want to comment on that.
Yes, I don't have the exact the statistics which has a direct bearing on your question, but this I could at least respond to you that I think there has been no a victim of the nuclear radioactive contamination caused by the Fukushima Daiichi power station accident. I mean, I'm telling you that no direct, but that doesn't mean, I think, of course, but because of the evacuation, obliged to take place, a huge a number of people living in the vicinity of the accident site were forced to leave where they used to live. And then that has certainly caused a tremendous stress, as you can imagine. They have to seek a shelter or somewhere to live. And then, I don't think I can really ascertain to what extent. And then there have been some people who, of course, died after March the 11th. But again, that is a fact. But I don't think I can make any sort of a statement to what extent that has been caused by the accident or not. I don't know the exact answer. Thank you.
I'm going to turn to our online viewers right now. We have a question that has come in from Jeremy Gordon at the World Nuclear Association, directed at Mr. Magwood. And Jeremy asks us, what would you say is the single most important improvement across the NEA member countries' nuclear fleet, and why?
I appreciate that question. Very clearly, I think it has been the institution of flexible, mobile power systems and cooling equipment at all the nuclear plants. This provides the capability for plants to respond to events that have not been considered. If there is an event of any type that challenges the ability of a nuclear power plant to maintain core cooling, the equipment that has been provided at nuclear plants around the world is such that whatever circumstances develop on the nuclear plant site, it is now possible to respond positively and to avoid damage to the core and to avoid problems in the spent fuel pools. This is something that's is really a new way of thinking for nuclear operators. And also, I think the training that has gone with this new equipment has enabled nuclear operators to be in a better position to respond to the unexpected than ever would have been imagined 5 years ago. So I do believe that as a result of what's been learned from the Fukushima accident, that nuclear plants around the world have flexible approaches to dealing with a wide range of possible accident scenarios to prevent the worst from happening.
Do I have any questions from the room? Okay, we'll take one from our Assembly feed then, and I will post it so that everyone can see. And the question is, which human elements were involved in the Fukushima accident, and how can they be addressed?
Well, I think there's a very complex question that I don't think we can answer in a great deal of detail here, but I will give you some examples. As we mentioned earlier, there were clearly deficiencies in the former nuclear regulatory regime, and that the regime in Japan at the time was not sufficiently independent, sufficiently concerned about the potential for severe accidents and the preparation for severe accidents to enable it to be to provide an adequate response to what occurred on 3/11. So improving the safety culture and the independence of regulatory regimes is something that's been highlighted in this report as something that's very important. And I believe Japan has responded to that extremely successfully with the creation of the NRA. There were also issues associated with the training of the staff at the nuclear power plant. There was documented by many observers, particularly in Japan, that operators at the plant were not sufficiently familiar with the procedures to operate some of the equipment that was designed at the plant to respond to severe accidents, and that this lack of training led to problems in how that equipment was used. So training improvements is another aspect of the lessons learned from Fukushima that are being addressed around the world. So I'll just use those two very prominent examples, but there are many others that can be taken from what occurred and to try to find ways of strengthening the ability of nuclear operators and nuclear regulators to protect against future accidents.
Thank you. Any questions from the room? Then turning to a different question that we've received from NukeNet, they would like to ask, is there a need for greater regulatory harmonization? What is being done in this area, and what more may need to be done as well?
Another very good question. I think that a better way of considering this topic is not so much whether there's a need for greater harmonization, but whether there's a need for greater cooperation and engagement among regulatory authorities. And I think the answer to that is clearly yes. One outcome of the Fukushima accident has been that regulators around the world cooperate, compare notes, talk, exchange information at a level and at a consistency that would have been unimaginable 5 years ago. Regulators around the world have become convinced that working together to improve their regimes, both nationally and internationally, is a top priority, and that there is much, much more cooperation among regulators than there was before. Whether this needs to be harmonized any further, that's a debate that has been taking place for quite some time. My belief is that there's an automatic harmonization that takes place as we exchange information. And I'll give you an example. As many of you know, when the accident occurred, I was a commissioner with the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And in the years after the accident, I traveled around the world and visited many nuclear power plants in many countries and talked to regulators in many countries. And I was struck by the commonality in the response to the Fukushima accident and the commonality in understanding about that accident. And I believe that if you look around the world, you will see, while we use different terminology and different approaches, there is a considerable amount of consistency between regulators on how they responded to this accident. And I think that that's the most important aspect of it. And I don't know, Ho, if you'd like to add anything.
Yes, thank you, Director General Magwood. I agree with the perspectives that were provided. A point I would maybe add in addition to it is what we had mentioned before, that many of the national standards and requirements are based on very country-specific circumstances and specific hazards that exist within each country. So when you bring these international regulators and governments together, sometimes you may not be able to find a one-size-fits-all approach to every single circumstance. So where appropriate, harmonization could bring some benefits where large gaps are not perceived in different regions of the world, but there are some instances where things may make sense more in one country than another. And I think bringing the international community together, as Director General Magwood does, by itself encourage the notion and idea of harmonization. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those replies. Do I have a request from the audience here with us? Turning back to Twitter then, and again, Jeremy Gordon from the WNA, who has a second question. He would like to know, what is the most important aspect to train future leaders to be better prepared for decision-making in emergency situations? I'll repeat that question. What is the most important aspect to train future leaders to be better prepared for decision-making in emergency situations?
I think we're trying to decide future leaders of what are we referring to. If we're talking about future leaders of nuclear facilities, I think that clearly the overall effort that we have undertaken in many countries to respond to the lessons of Fukushima have brought about a true revolution in the way that leadership at nuclear power plants and leadership at nuclear regulatory authorities look at nuclear operations. I think that the fact that this happened in an advanced country with advanced technologies shows everyone, as Ho-Ni said a few minutes ago, that you can never entirely rule out the possibility of a nuclear accident. So therefore, everyone has to redouble their efforts and has to be on guard against any possibility of allowing the kinds of behaviors or failures that could lead to a severe accident. And I think that that's a lesson that everyone has learned, and particularly for many people who have visited the site and seeing that there are still large areas of Japan that cannot be today occupied, is a very personal and emotional experience for people to go to the site, and one that is very lasting. And I think that many people who have had that experience have walked away with internalizing that they have to look at every detail more and more carefully to assure that there is no such accident ever again in the future. And I think that this is something that has been very important.
Also, if I may add to what Director General Magwood had provided, I think a very important aspect for training future leaders is also practice. Getting involved and participating in actual emergency exercises, particularly for those leaders that are going to be decision makers, because that involves a wide variety of interpersonal skills, technical skills. So taking the opportunity to be in an environment, a simulated environment, where there's a nuclear power plant event or accident, and actually having to make those decisions, having to rely on the technical competence of the staff that are involved with assessing what is going on. I think that is a very important element to consider for future leaders. It's benefited me for many years while I was working with the Navy's nuclear power plants, as well as when I was involved with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission in responding to actual events at a nuclear facility that we were responsible for regulating. So I think the practice during emergency exercises and participating and being critical with your self-assessment of how you perform is a very important element of training future leaders. Thank you.
Maybe a last question from the floor, if we have one. If you could do it.
日本語でどうぞ。でもしあれば通訳いたしますので、トランスレートしますので、遠慮なくポイント。
恐縮です。フジテレビの後藤と申します。今議長のお話の中でこの5年前と比較して国際協力情報交換というものが行われているというお言葉あったんですけれども、その原発事故っていうものは事態が深刻であればあるほど情報交換というのはしにくくなるものだと。でこの報告書は非常に改善的ないいことが書かれているんですけども、今後こういう想定されない事態にも対応されていくいい対応というものに発展されていくと思われますかという質問です。
I understand. His question regards, of course, really, I think this. How well he understands that the international collaboration, cooperation amongst the nuclear regulators and also operators and then governments on this issue of nuclear safety has greatly improved in comparison to the level of cooperation 5 years ago. So over the last 5 years, I think, yes, we've seen a great improvement in the international collaboration in terms of the exchange of information on these issues. But now, but still, you also at the same time in this also report has maintained that still in the future, really unexpected, not really wholly not wholly expected kind of accident can happen. Yes. So this, yes, in that respect, he believes that this is a very positive a product. But from here again, so for further action to be taken, I think from here again to also looking beyond the next 5 years and or even down the road, I think 10 years in the future. What is your then? How do you think you can still even improve the international collaboration on this issue?
It's the most senior translator I've ever had in my entire career. Thank you very much. It's a very interesting question. I think that going forward, one recognition that I would make is that we have been very diligent and very detailed about looking at the equipment related, particularly the procedural related factors to improve nuclear safety at nuclear power plants around the world. And I think that we have been very, very successful in implementing these measures. And I think that if you look at every country, you will see the pumps and power systems, communications equipment, everything has been enhanced in the aftermath of Fukushima. The one thing that is most difficult to enhance is one of the most important components of a nuclear power plant, and that is the people. And I think that over the next 5 to 10 years, you will most likely see a greater effort in dealing with the people aspect of operating nuclear power plants, assuring that safety culture is satisfactory, assuring that organizations can make good decisions, assuring that the training is in place. These are easy words to say, but in many cases very complicated to implement. And we have seen this over and over again. If you go back and look at things that occurred in 3 Mile Island, if you look at what occurred in Chernobyl, these accidents, and as well as Fukushima, all these accidents had a very important human aspect. And it seems to be a lesson that we keep learning over and over again. So if we're going to prevent these things from happening in the future, we have to become better at dealing with the human element. And I think you're going to see that to become a greater and greater part of the conversation globally as we go forward.
Thank you. Would you like to take one more question? Okay, so anyone in the room? And if not, I will turn back to our assembly feed. This question says, after what happened at Fukushima, how can we safely balance nuclear safety, nuclear waste, and nuclear energy more generally? And if I may rephrase in my own words, how do you see the future of nuclear energy from the nuclear safety perspective?
It's a very comprehensive question. Let me try to give a relatively simple answer. I think that looking at the incident of Fukushima, it simply highlights how important it is that everyone working in the nuclear area makes safety their highest priority. That everyone see it as their personal mission to assure nuclear safety, and that any question about the safety of a nuclear facility has to be addressed and has to be dealt with at the appropriate levels. And when we look at the operation of nuclear power plants, we recognize that nuclear safety, assuring nuclear safety, is our highest responsibility. But that doesn't mean that we don't operate nuclear power plants in many countries. I think many countries have already made the decision that the energy security, the environmental benefits, and in many cases the economic benefits provided by nuclear energy make it an energy source that cannot be lost to the world. So while we must make sure that safety is a high priority, the energy is still very important to our societies and very important to the future of our economies, our societies, to provide for energy, for everything from education to healthcare, and those needs are only going to grow. They are not going to shrink. So we have to balance our desire for energy with the environmental realities, and therefore we have to deal with nuclear safety, and we have to deal with nuclear waste. And I believe that if you were to look at the various NEA reports on these subjects over the last several years, there are very comprehensive approaches to deal with all these issues. And I'm very confident that nuclear power plants can be operated safely in all of our member countries and are being operated safely. And I'm also very confident that all of our member countries can deal with nuclear waste. Nuclear waste is much more of a policy issue than it is a technical issue, and is one that can be dealt with. And it's also one that some of our members in countries such as France and Finland and Sweden are dealing with very, very effectively. And I think they will provide good examples going forward. So after Fukushima, I believe that our answer should be to redouble our efforts to deal with the nuclear safety issues, proceed with closing the issue of nuclear waste, and to make sure that that energy source is available as an option for our member countries well into the future.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think we've gone slightly past time. Ambassador Kodama, would you like the floor?
Yes, thank you very much. On the last question, actually, to which I think Director General Mr. Magwood gave an excellent answer. So I humbly just agree with what he said. But if I may, I would just add one or 2 points. I think, yes, this remains a very difficult issue confronting Japan, Japanese people, Japanese government, Japanese nation. How to find a balance between a reliance on nuclear power generation as a source of energy. At the same time, how to then ensure the nuclear safety all along, I think, not to never again repeating the accident like Fukushima Daiichi power plant. And in the end, I think what is really necessary, of course, each nation has its own, can decide on its own, I think. And then I think the point is, I think we live in a world of democracy. So I think in each nation, I think in the end, we can only find answer through a democratic process, I think, to find a answer to this difficult question. But then my second point is, in order to ensure whatever answer a given nation, country can find, I think it is so important that we should ensure a platform based on which we can conduct a very much informed discussion. And in order to ensure the informed discussion, I think we have here NEA, or maybe IAEA, or any other relevant international organizations, I think, which can help us provide us necessary facts-based analysis and facts and information, and I think good practices and viewpoints. So then I hope we'll be able to find a answer to this difficult question. So for that matter, again, I am just to close, I think, again, let me thank the NEA most dearly, sincerely, that for, again, issuing the outcome. I think I also hope that this report will be read by our people in Japan also, and then also all over the world, people all over the world. And finally, of course, when I watched the page 7 of Mr. Nii's presentation, examples of safety enhancements, and for me, being a Japanese, it is poignant, really, to go through all these items. External hazard reassessments, we were not well prepared to expect the tsunami could come, provide even higher, tidal wave, more than 10% or 11, 18%, 20%. We failed in expecting that can happen. And then you say increasing the robustness of electrical power supplies. Again, we completely failed because of tsunami. All power, was cut off. We struggled. And then availability of provision of portable electric power supplies and sufficient battery supplies, list goes on and on. So I stop here. But, well, I think these are very, very, useful, lessons learned from the Fukushima. We know, Japanese people we know in Japan. But I think these are such valuable lessons to be really shared by the, NPPs all over the world, and also regulators. So again, I thank you very much. Thank you.
Allow us to thank you, Ambassador Kodama. We greatly appreciate your presence here with us today. Thank you to our speakers, to those who joined us in the room today, and all of our viewers online. I'd like to remind you all that the full report is available on our website, as are the executive summaries in both English and Japanese. For those of you in the room, we also have a press release available in English and in Japanese that we will be distributing at the exit. Thank you.